When the flames rose higher than the rooftops, I thought it was just another night on duty, another life to save, another story I'd never tell. But that night changed everything. Because the man I carried out of the fire wasn't just someone in need, he became the reason my own heart started burning in ways I never imagined. His eyes met mine through the smoke, and something passed between us that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with desire. This is not just a story about rescue. It's about discovering what happens when two lives collide in a moment of chaos and leave behind something unforgettable. It's about courage, not only in the face of fire, but in the face of emotions we never thought we'd allow ourselves to feel. Stay with me until the end, because this story will take you deeper than smoke and flames. It will make you question what risks are truly worth taking. And before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat and tug at your heart. The alarm shattered the quiet of the firehouse just after midnight. I had been halfway through a cup of burnt coffee when the call came in. An apartment fire on the east side, top floor fully engulfed, multiple residents still inside. We suited up fast, every motion drilled into muscle memory. The weight of the gear pressed on my shoulders, the mask and helmet transforming me into a machine built for one purpose: go in, get them out, stay alive. When we pulled up, the building was already spitting flames into the night. Smoke rolled down the street like a living thing, and the glow of fire turned the windows into screaming mouths. People were gathered outside, coughing, crying, clutching one another, but a frantic voice cut through the chaos. "My brother, he's still inside," a woman sobbed, pointing upward. "Top floor, corner apartment." I didn't think. I just moved. The chief gave the order, and I was on the stairs, the hose team behind me, water hammering against the inferno. Every step was a fight, the heat clawing at us, the smoke choking through the mask. Inside, the hallway was a tunnel of fire. Doors hung open, apartments already gutted, the ceiling collapsing in patches. I followed the sound, someone coughing, faint but desperate. I kicked open the corner door, and that's when I saw him. He was on the floor, crawling toward the window, his face streaked with soot, his eyes wild with panic. The fire had boxed him in, flames licking at the walls around him. For a second, time froze. Our eyes locked, and I swear something in my chest shifted. It wasn't just another rescue. It felt personal, like I had been meant to find him here. "I've got you," I shouted through the mask, my voice muffled but fierce. He tried to stand but his legs buckled, smoke tearing through his lungs. I grabbed him, strong arms pulling him against me, and his body felt terrifyingly fragile in my grip. He clung to me, his fingers digging into my jacket as if he knew I was his only chance. "Don't let me go," he rasped. His voice was raw, broken, but it cut through everything. The fire, the sirens, even the pounding of my own heart. "I won't," I swore. I pulled him over my shoulder in a fireman's carry, but he fought weakly against it, his hand fisting in my gear like he needed to stay close. I adjusted, half carrying him, half dragging him as I forced us through the burning hallway. The building groaned, wood cracking overhead. Sparks rained down, landing on my helmet, bouncing off my gloves. I tightened my grip around his waist. "Stay with me." His face pressed against my chest, hot tears cutting clean lines through the soot on his cheeks. He coughed violently, and for one terrifying moment, his body went limp. "No!" I growled, shaking him slightly. "Not now. Breathe. You hear me? Just breathe." And then, as if he'd heard the command deep in his bones, he gasped, sucking in just enough air to keep going. Relief surged through me, stronger than the fire's heat. We stumbled down the stairs, each step a war. The exit was a blur of chaos. Firefighters shouting, hoses spraying, smoke clawing at my skin. But when we broke through into the cold night air, the weight lifted. The crowd outside erupted in relief. Medics rushed toward us, pulling him from my arms and laying him on the stretcher. His eyes fluttered open, hazy, searching. For a moment, his hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. His gaze locked on mine, and in that single look, there was gratitude, fear, and something else, something that made my heart lurch in my chest. "Don't leave," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I crouched beside him, pressing my gloved hand over his. I'm right here. You're safe now. The medics worked quickly, fitting an oxygen mask over his face, checking his vitals. I should have stepped back, let them do their job, but I couldn't pull away. His hands stayed latched to mine until they had to physically move me aside. The chief barked orders, calling me back to the crew. I stood, torn, watching as they loaded him into the ambulance. The flashing red lights reflected in his eyes as the doors closed, sealing him away. Only then did I realize how hard my heart was pounding, not just from the adrenaline, but from the connection I couldn't explain. I'd saved dozens of people in my career, but never like this. Never with the feeling that something had shifted inside me forever. Back at the station, I couldn't shake it. His face haunted me, the way he looked at me as if I was more than just a rescuer, the way his hand refused to let go. I didn't even know his name. But I knew one thing for certain, this wasn't the end. The next morning, I woke up still tasting smoke in my throat. My gear had been cleaned, the fire was out, and the station was quiet again. But my mind wasn't. I couldn't stop seeing his face, the way his soot-streaked eyes locked on mine, the grip of his hand refusing to let go. I told myself it was just adrenaline. Every firefighter knows that connection in a rescue feels intense because lives are on the line. But something in me knew this was different. By noon, I gave in. I asked one of the medics who'd been on the scene the night before. The guy from the top-floor apartment, the one we pulled out, where'd they take him? She raised an eyebrow. St. Mary's. Smoke inhalation, mild burns, but he's stable. Stable. Relief spread through me like a second wind. I grabbed my jacket and keys before I could second-guess myself. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation. I checked in at the desk, not sure how much I should reveal. I'm a firefighter. I brought someone in last night. Top-floor apartment fire. Can I see him? The nurse gave me a look that was half curious, half compassionate. Room 314. He's awake. My heart beat faster as I climbed the stairs. What was I even doing here? Was it professional courtesy, or something else I couldn't admit out loud? When I reached the door, I paused. Through the small window, I saw him sitting upright in bed, an oxygen tube in his nose, his skin still streaked faintly with soot despite the nurse's care. He was staring out the window, lost in thought. I knocked lightly and stepped inside. His head turned, and for a moment his eyes widened in recognition. You, he said softly, his voice still raspy but stronger than before. I smiled, suddenly unsure of what to do with my hands. Yeah, me. He gestured weakly toward the chair beside his bed. Sit, please. I obeyed, settling into the chair like I was entering sacred ground. How are you feeling? Alive, he said with a wry smile. Thanks to you. I shrugged, trying to hide the warmth rising in my chest. It's my job. No, he said firmly, his eyes locking onto mine. You didn't just do your job. You stayed with me. Even when the medics pulled me away, you didn't let go. You have no idea what that meant. The room went quiet, except for the steady beep of the monitor. I swallowed, suddenly aware of the intensity in his gaze. I didn't catch your name, I said finally. Ethan, he replied. And you? Ryan. Ryan, he repeated, like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. I owe you more than I can ever repay. You don't owe me anything, I said quickly. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. His expression softened, and something unspoken passed between us. It wasn't gratitude, it was recognition. Like he'd seen something in me, through the smoke and chaos, that he couldn't forget either. Over the next hour, we talked. Not about the fire, at least not only about the fire, but about life. He was a writer, recently moved into that apartment, working on a novel that was both his dream and his burden. He laughed softly when he admitted he'd almost lost his manuscript to the flames. Guess life was telling me to start over, he joked, though I could hear the tremor beneath the humor. I told him about the job, about nights when the fire felt endless, about the strange way we carried other people's tragedies home with us. He listened with an intensity that made me feel seen, Not just as a firefighter, but as a man. At one point, he reached out, his fingers brushing the back of my hand. The touch was light, almost uncertain, but it sent a spark through me all the same. "Last night I thought it was over," he said quietly. "And then you came through the smoke. I don't know why, but I felt safe. Even before you said anything. Just seeing you." I didn't know how to respond. My throat tightened, and for once in my life, words failed me. So I did the only thing I could. I squeezed his hand gently, letting the silence say what I couldn't. A nurse interrupted eventually, reminding me that visiting hours were nearly over. I stood reluctantly, not wanting to break the fragile connection we'd built in those few hours. "I'll come back," I promised before I could think better of it. Ethan smiled, his eyes bright despite the shadows under them. "I'd like that." As I left the hospital, I felt lighter and heavier all at once. Lighter because I knew he was safe. Heavier because I knew this was no longer just about a rescue. It was about what came after, the unexpected pull I couldn't ignore. That night at the station, the guys teased me for being distracted. I barely heard them. All I could think about was Ethan. His voice, his smile, the way his hand lingered against mine. I'd saved countless people, but none had ever saved me. Until him. And as I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, one thought consumed me. What if this fire wasn't just the end of one chapter in his life? What if it was the beginning of ours? Ethan was discharged a few days later. The doctors cleared his lungs enough for him to go home, though they warned him about rest and medication. I told myself I should let him recover quietly, but that thought didn't last long. By the end of the week, I was back at his apartment building, staring up at the charred skeleton of what had once been his home. He wasn't there. The place was unlivable, blackened walls and melted windows framing memories turned to ash. But I knew where he would be, at his sister's house, where she'd been taking care of him since the fire. When I knocked on her door, she looked surprised but not unkind. "You're the firefighter, right?" I nodded. "Ryan." Her expression softened. "He talks about you. A lot. Come in." Ethan was on the couch, a blanket over his lap and a notebook balanced on his knees. When he saw me, his whole face lit up. "You came," he said, his voice still a little raw but filled with warmth. "I wanted to check on you," I replied. "See how you're holding up." He gestured for me to sit. "Better, thanks to you. Physically, anyway." Mentally, he trailed off, eyes clouding. I leaned forward. "Nightmares?" He nodded. "Sometimes I wake up smelling smoke, even when it's not there. I see the fire, feel the heat. And then I remember your voice cutting through it. That's the only thing that calms me down." His words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know what to say, so I let instinct guide me. I reached over, covering his hand with mine. He didn't flinch. He leaned into it. We sat like that for a while, the silence comfortable, until his sister appeared with tea and gave me a knowing look before retreating to the kitchen. That night marked the beginning of something unspoken between us. I started stopping by after shifts, sometimes bringing takeout, sometimes just sitting with him while he wrote. His sister teased us gently, but never intruded. One evening, after she'd gone to bed, Ethan closed his notebook and looked at me across the dimly lit room. "Do you ever wonder why people end up where they do?" he asked. I frowned. "What do you mean? What are the odds? That you'd be the one to come through that door? That out of all the firefighters, it was you?" I didn't answer right away. Because I'd been wondering the same thing. "Maybe it wasn't chance," I said finally. His eyes searched mine. "So you feel it too?" The air between us shifted, thick with possibility. His hand drifted toward mine on the couch cushion, hesitant, then bold. Our fingers intertwined, and my pulse quickened. "Ethan," I began, but he shook his head. "Don't talk," he whispered. "Just stay." So I stayed. The first time he laughed again, really laughed, it was because I told a story about nearly setting my own gear on fire during training. His laugh was hoarse, but it filled the room like sunlight breaking through smoke. "God, I needed that," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "You make me forget what happened. You make me feel normal again." "You're stronger than you think," I told him. "You don't need me for that." But he shook his head. I think I do. Or maybe I just want to. The honesty in his words caught me off guard. It was the same honesty I felt building inside me but hadn't dared to voice. Weeks passed and he grew stronger. He started walking more, his cough fading. One night, as we walked outside under the stars, he stopped suddenly. Ryan, he said, his breath fogging in the cool air. I'm scared. Of what? Of what this is becoming. Of what I feel when I'm with you. I took a deep breath. The firefighter in me knew how to run into burning buildings, but this was a different kind of fire. I'm scared too, I admitted. But maybe that means it's real. He looked at me, his eyes vulnerable but steady. And what if we get burned? Then at least we'll know we stood in the fire together, I replied. The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. His hand found mine, fingers threading through like it was the most natural thing in the world. Later that night, as I dropped him back at his sister's, he lingered at the door. Ryan? Yeah. He hesitated, then leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss against my cheek. It was brief, almost shy, but it left me breathless. Good night, he murmured, closing the door softly. I stood there in the quiet street, my heart hammering like a siren. This wasn't just gratitude. This was something deeper, something neither of us had planned for but both of us were powerless to stop. As I drove back to the station, I knew one thing. The fire had changed us both. But maybe, just maybe, it had burned away everything that didn't matter, leaving behind only what was true. And that truth was undeniable. For a while, it felt like we were living in a fragile bubble. I'd see Ethan almost every day after my shifts, sometimes still in uniform, smelling faintly of smoke and sweat. We'd talk, laugh, eat takeout from cheap diners, and sit shoulder to shoulder in quiet moments that said more than words ever could. But real life has a way of breaking through. And for us, it came in the form of a knock on his sister's door one evening. A man in a dark suit stood on the porch, clipboard in hand. Mr. Clark? He asked, scanning Ethan. I'm with the insurance company. We need your statement about the fire. I sat on the couch, tense. Ethan nodded and followed him to the kitchen table. I tried not to listen, but their voices carried. The agent's tone was clinical, detached. We've reviewed the initial reports. It seems the fire started from faulty wiring, but there are concerns about negligence. Do you have renter's insurance? Any history of electrical issues you failed to report? Ethan's voice cracked. I didn't know. The landlord never. The man cut him off. Regardless, we need to assess liability. It may be months before you receive any compensation. Until then, your apartment is condemned. When the agent left, Ethan's hands trembled as he poured himself a glass of water. His sister tried to comfort him, but he pushed her away gently, retreating to the porch. I followed. He leaned against the railing, staring at the night sky. Everything I owned, gone. And now they're saying it might have been my fault. What if they don't pay out? What if I never get back on my feet? I stepped closer, wanting to take his pain and shoulder it myself. You're not alone in this, Ethan. But he shook his head, his jaw tight. You say that now. But I've seen it before. People get tired of carrying broken things. Is that what you think you are? Broken? His eyes snapped to mine, filled with anger and fear. I lost everything, Ryan. My home. My work. Even my sense of safety. And now this thing between us, you're risking your career for someone who doesn't even have a roof over his head. The words stung more than the heat of any fire I'd faced. This isn't a risk I regret, I said firmly. I didn't walk through those flames to leave you now. He looked away, but I caught the way his shoulders trembled. The next few days were harder. Ethan withdrew, retreating into himself, his laughter gone. I kept showing up, but sometimes he barely acknowledged me. His sister pulled me aside once, whispering, "He's scared, Ryan. Not just of losing things, of losing you." One night, after another silent dinner, I finally confronted him. "Talk to me, Ethan. What's going on in your head?" He slammed his notebook shut, frustration spilling over. "What do you want me to say? That I can't stop seeing fire every time I close my eyes? That I wake up choking on smoke that isn't there? That I feel like I'm drowning and dragging you under with me? I stared at him, my heart breaking. Then let me drown with you. Because I'd rather be in the fire with you than safe without you. His breath hitched, and for a moment his defenses cracked. Tears welled in his eyes, and he whispered, "Why me? Why risk so much for me?" I stepped forward, cupping his face gently. Because the night I carried you out, it wasn't just a rescue. It was a beginning. And I can't ignore that, no matter how scared you are. Just as the walls between us began to crumble, another storm hit. I was at the station when my captain pulled me into his office. "Ryan, we need to talk." His tone was grave. My stomach tightened. "We've had questions about your involvement with one of the fire victims. People saw you at the hospital and at his sister's place." I froze. "We're friends," I said, though my voice sounded unconvincing even to my own ears. The captain's eyes narrowed. "Friends or more, you need to be careful. If the department thinks you're crossing lines, it could jeopardize your career. You understand?" I nodded stiffly, but inside I was torn. To protect Ethan, I'd have to keep my distance. But the thought of walking away felt impossible. That evening, I told Ethan what the captain had said. He went pale. "So now I'm ruining your life too." I grabbed his hands, forcing him to look at me. "Don't you dare say that. You're not ruining anything. This is my choice. And I'd choose it again." His lips trembled. "What if they make you choose between your job and me?" The question cut deep. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. We sat in silence, the weight of it pressing down, until finally he whispered, "I don't want to be your fire to put out, Ryan. I want to be your reason to stay." I leaned in, pressing my forehead against his. "Then let's fight for that." The night ended with us sitting together on the porch, hands clasped tightly, as if holding on could keep the world from tearing us apart. But deep down, I knew the fire between us was only growing, and sooner or later, we'd have to face the flames head-on. The night after my captain's warning, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face. His fear, his doubt, the way his voice cracked when he asked if I'd have to choose between him and my career. The truth was, I didn't know what I would choose if it ever came to that. But I knew one thing. I couldn't live pretending this wasn't real. The next morning, I drove straight to his sister's house before even going to the station. Ethan sat on the porch steps, hoodie pulled tight around him, staring out at the empty street. His coffee was untouched, hands wrapped around the mug like he needed the warmth but couldn't feel it. When he saw me, his eyes softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I had to," I replied, taking the step up to stand in front of him. "I can't keep pretending this is just about a fire or about helping a victim. You're more than that to me, Ethan." He looked away, voice trembling. "You'll lose everything." I crouched down so our eyes met. "I've run into burning buildings without knowing if I'd come out alive. This isn't losing everything. This is finding something I didn't even know I was missing." His lips parted, his breath uneven, and for the first time in days, he didn't push me away. Later that evening, Ethan asked me to drive him somewhere. He didn't say where, just told me to trust him. We drove across town to the remains of his apartment building. The blackened skeleton of walls stood like a monument to everything he had lost. He stood there for a long time, arms crossed, as if bracing himself against ghosts. "I keep coming back here," he admitted. "Like if I stare at it long enough, I'll find a piece of myself I lost in the flames." I stood beside him, silent. Finally, he turned to me. "You saved me that night. But you can't keep saving me, Ryan. I have to find a way to save myself too." I reached for his hand, holding it firmly. "Then let me walk through it with you." For a moment he hesitated. Then he squeezed my hand back. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it felt like the beginning of something neither of us could deny anymore. The real turning point came a week later. The fire department held a fundraiser for victims, a public event at the station. Families gathered, reporters lingered, and firefighters posed for photos with kids. I was working the grill, flipping burgers, when I saw Ethan arrive. My heart stuttered. He wore a clean shirt, hair combed back, though there was still a shadow of sadness in his eyes. He looked out of place but determined. I moved toward him, but before I could speak, one of my fellow firefighters clapped me on the back. "Isn't that the guy from the apartment fire?" Heads turned. Whispers spread. I felt the weight of a dozen eyes on us. Ethan stiffened, his jaw set. For a moment, I feared he'd bolt. But instead, he took a breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped closer to me. In front of everyone, he said, "I can't keep hiding." His voice shook, but he held my gaze. "You pulled me out of the flames, Ryan. But what really saved me was what came after. And I don't care who knows it anymore." The world seemed to hold its breath. My captain's words echoed in my mind, but I couldn't ignore what was in front of me. Slowly, deliberately, I reached out and took Ethan's hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few awkward coughs. And then, silence. I looked at him, my chest tight, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Then we don't hide." It was reckless. It was terrifying. But in that moment, it was freedom. That night, after the crowd dispersed and the station quieted, Ethan and I sat in the fire truck bay, legs dangling over the side of the engine. "You sure you want this?" he asked softly. I turned to him, studying the flicker of light in his eyes. "I've never been more sure. Fires will always come, Ethan. But so will the reasons to fight them. You're one of mine." His expression crumbled, tears spilling down his cheeks. Without hesitation, I pulled him into my arms. He clung to me like I was his anchor in a storm. "I thought losing everything meant I had nothing left," he whispered into my shoulder. "But maybe it just made room for this." Weeks passed. The insurance battle dragged on. The whispers at the station lingered, but something inside us had shifted. We weren't hiding. We weren't running. We were choosing, every day in small ways. I still woke to alarms and rushed into burning buildings. Ethan still faced nightmares and the slow rebuilding of his life. But now, when he opened his eyes in the dark, he found my hand waiting for his. And when I returned from calls smelling of smoke and exhaustion, I found him sitting on my porch, a quiet smile on his face, reminding me why I kept running into fire. Looking back, I realized the flames that night didn't just destroy. They revealed. They burned away everything false and left us standing raw, scared, but honest. This isn't a fairy tale. We're not perfect. We still fight, still stumble, still question. But every time the doubt comes, I remember the heat of the fire, the weight of him in my arms, and the truth we found in ashes. Sometimes the things we think will break us are the very sparks that light a new beginning.